We have questions not only about why these lives were lost, but about the LGBTQ2S's community's relationship of trust with the city in general.
How is it that they were able to go missing?
Because they were Middle Eastern or South Asian, we kind of said, well, maybe they had their own reasons for disappearing.
Are they linked? Is there something more to this? Why are these brown men going missing?
I always ask myself why.
It's not just a matter of us sitting back and saying, well, we hope the police figure everything out.
The evidence today tells us that there's not a serial killer based on the evidence that's involved.
A lot of times what we see is that serial killers are able to get away with killing repeatedly because the people that they target are marginalized in some way, shape, or form. They're much more likely to slip through the cracks.
Andrew Kinsman has been missing for 10 days now, and tonight Toronto police say they cannot rule out, nor can they rule in the possibility that his disappearance may be linked to 3 unsolved mysteries, 3 men who disappeared from the gay village and have never been found.
It's known as the Village, and for decades this neighborhood has been the heart of Toronto's LGBTQ community. But after a series of unsolved deaths and suspicious disappearances, it's now a crime scene.
I'll start from the beginning. Back in September of 2010, the first person went missing, a 40-year-old man. He was at a bar in the Church and Wellesley Street area. He left with an unknown man. But what the investigators of 51 Division did, they looked at other similarities of other cases. So they came up with 2 other missing men. They frequented the Church and Wellesley Street area as well.
Police announced their fears that the disappearances of those 3 men were suspicious and connected. They created a task force and dubbed it Project Houston, but the men have never been found. The obvious question with the disappearance now of another middle-aged man from the village, could Andrew Kinsman's case be connected?
Dating back to 2010, 2012, there was preconceptions that hindered investigations into missing cases around gay men. If a man goes missing, the assumption is, well, he's left of his own accord because men have agency and men make decisions and they decide to go missing. Whereas if it was a woman, it would be suspicious and it would be automatically considered something abnormal because, you know, women don't just decide to go missing.
We noticed that people fit a certain profile. They were men of color, largely new Canadians, or at least what we perceive to be new Canadians. The discussion was, are they linked? Is there something more to this? Why are these brown men going missing? Are they connected in any way? So there was a lot of questions, but very few answers.
They sat there and reviewed old missing persons cases to find linkages, and they found linkages. They linked 3 cases that were incredibly similar, both in terms of age, sexuality, ethnicity, bars frequented. In some cases, in one particular case, it was even personal connections. They all had a connection to a guy named Bruce McArthur that led them to interview Bruce McArthur.
I remember in 2013, I was out on the street reporting on this issue, talking to people, and police were doing the same. From where I was standing, they were doing their job, but now we hear that people were dismissed. In some cases, I've heard that they were even mocked because of their suspicions of a serial killer. And it is really in keeping with a relationship that the queer community has had with the police.
I've been living in Toronto, the gay area in Toronto, the gay area being near Church and Wellesley for about 48 years now. And it's changed enormously. I mean, there wasn't the village back in the 70s. Where the gay areas were along Yonge Street between Carlton and Wellesley. The gay life in the 70s was very different than today. It was a very secret world. It was kind of a, well, in some ways it was a gay fantasy land. I mean, there were all these secret, it was like being part of a cult, you know? You wanted to meet men, there were clubs. The police were very It wasn't a priority of them to go after homosexuals, but when they did, they were quite nasty because they considered homosexuals criminals. A friend of mine, George Hislop, at the time, tried to talk to the police in the 70s, 60s about having liaison with the gay community, and they said, liaison? Why would we want liaison with a criminal group? You know, homosexuals are criminals. Why would we want liaison with criminals? That was the mindset. A lot of people, for whatever reason, still hold those negative beliefs about certain marginalized people.
I worked homicide for 8.5 years, ran homicide, and I can tell you there is no diminishment of investigation due to type of lifestyle or individual. Every single case was aggressively investigated with as much passion and as much vigor as necessary to solve the case.
What led you to conclude that there might be a serial killer behind the disappearances of these men?
So one case by itself might not be a big red flag. When you have 3 cases in the span of less than 2 years of 3 guys who share so many similarities, who are tied to one relatively small geographic area, it's so incredibly unlikely that they would just disappear.
A lot of times what we see is that serial killers are able to get away with killing repeatedly because the people that they target are marginalized in some way, shape, or form. They're much more likely to slip through the cracks. They target certain populations that they know are not going to elicit a lot of public attention, whether from the news, whether from community members, or even the police.
There is no evidence at this point in time which in any way establishes the disappearances of Salim Essen and Andrew Kinsman are linked to the disappearance of the males from the Project Houston investigation.
The evidence today tells us that there is not a serial killer based on the evidence that's involved. One more question.
I remember reading and hearing about men going missing and police investigations with different names and so forth, and you can't look in detail at every single file that's going on in the city, but you assume that the system is working as it should, that everything is being investigated that possibly can be, that maximum effort is being made, and it is only later, sometimes with the benefit of hindsight, admittedly, that you realize that, things were not as they should have been.
This morning at approximately 10:25 a.m., police arrested 66-year-old Bruce McArthur of the City of Toronto. He is self-employed as a landscaper, and he lives in the Thorncliffe Park area. He has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in relation to Mr. Kinsman and Mr. Essen. And we believe he is responsible for the deaths of other men who have yet to be identified. In other words, we believe there are other victims. It'd be hard to define a more gruesome way to dispose of someone after you've killed them. It's one thing to kill them, it's quite another to dismember them, and then it's quite another to really quite callously put those remains into planters on properties of different people around the city.
They say the investigation still centers on this home here on Mallory Crescent, as well as the Thorncliffe Park apartment. But here they've been seizing planters containing human remains. And yesterday, police charged Bruce McArthur with 3 more counts of first-degree murder.
We believe there are more victims on top of those 5. And as we identify those victims, I can't give you any idea about a number, but I do expect more charges to be laid.
When I heard that Bruce McArthur would volunteer as Santa Claus during the holidays, it immediately reminded me of John Wayne Gacy, who was a clown at children's birthday parties. And, a lot of times serial killers will don a mask that is so far removed from the secret and dark fantasy life that they have because they get a thrill out of tricking people.
As you know, on January the 18th, Bruce McArthur was arrested. He has been charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. One of the focuses of the investigation has been on human remains found within planters from Mallory Crescent. I can now add that the pathologists have identified the remains of Salim Essen, Dean Lisowick, and Abdul Basir Faizi.
Detective Sergeant, having worked on Project Houston, And today, for the first time, saying that all three of the people who were being investigated are dead and allegedly murdered by Bruce McArthur. Do you see the closure of Houston as a problem? I mean, as something you regret and something perhaps you might apologize to the gay community for just letting it go? I know it wasn't just you, but it was just let go in April of 2014, and nothing much was done from that period until July of 17.
All I can say about Houston, it was an exhaustive investigation, and the occurrences were never closed in April of 2014. It just merely got to a point where there was nothing left that the investigators could do. Hindsight's always 20/20. You can always go back and look at things that you did do or didn't do. All I can say is that I was familiar with Houston. I've looked back at those occurrences now, and I'm quite content that the job that was done by 51 Division in those days.
Detective Sergeant.
I'm rolling.
Okay, so James, you came here as an activist, right?
Yes, as an activist.
So
I'm an elder in the community now at almost 72.
So how do you feel about the fact that Vasey from Project Houston has finally,
Well, I think
that MacArthur's been charged with his murder?
I think that since July and August, the police have done an incredible job in investigating MacArthur and identifying the victims and identifying the remains, charging him with murder. I mean, they've done an awful lot in 8 months. So we must never forget that. As bad as it was for 7.5 years, the last 7 or 8 months they've made up for it. But one have to.
I had a bookstore for several years, and a lot of the bookstore ended up with me. Back in the 70s, 71 to the late 80s, mid 80s, we had a gay publication, very serious gay publication called The Body Politic. Okay, back in 79, a very good writer at The Body Politic, and it says here, he's likely to be a repressed homosexual. This is the unsolved murders. The killers were likely to be repressed homosexual rather than homophobic and violent straight men. The killers of these gay men made themselves have a predisposition to homosexuality. However, they've been trained to hate homosexuality. In destroying someone they've gone home with, they kill that part of themselves. They are filled with self-hatred. Now that is the psychiatrist writing about these unsolved murders in the 70s, and that applies to MacArthur too. He is obviously obviously homosexual, enjoying sex with men, but obviously trying to kill that part of himself. I was intrigued by all these murders and watching it carefully, but again, because they were Middle Eastern or South Asian, like a lot of the police and a lot of the mainstream gay white men, were privileged, of course, we kind of said, well, maybe they had their own reasons for disappearing.
In my experience as a brown gay man, in Toronto, is that you seek out people who are not going to do you harm. And they saw Bruce as that safety person. And I think Bruce himself probably looked for people who were vulnerable in some way, shape, or form. He may have had questions of, what's your status in Canada? Or does your family know that you're gay? Those kinds of questions that happen online all the time.
Today, Mr. MacArthur was brought back before the courts. Bruce McArthur is now charged with and alleged to have committed 8 murders.
How is it that these people were able to be amongst us in our lives, in these bars, in these coffee shops, friends of ours, all this, and were able to vanish without us, really doing enough? And, to some degree, you can never do enough, but how is it that they were able to go missing and we were not able to keep up that pressure long enough to make sure something happened? That is the self-reflection. The other half of that has to be, how is it the institutions that are supposed to protect us failed so utterly and completely? If there had been a dedicated missing persons unit, it may have connected those 2 missing persons cases in 2010.
It is saddening and unacceptable that it took the disappearance of Andrew Kinsman to potentially link the cases of the missing South Asian and Middle Eastern men. We call on the Toronto Police and City of Toronto to commit to the following actions. Given the circumstances, we must seriously consider whether the inadequacy of the initial investigations was because of racism and/or homophobia. The Toronto Police Services Board must commission an external review by a third party. The findings of the external review must be publicly released. We put out that letter in January 28th, and from that we had meetings with the mayor, and the mayor was on board, and we engaged them in conversation. I'm hoping that the mayor and the Toronto Police Services are open to that, and our indications have been that they are, and especially if they've given us some voice and they're hearing what we're saying.
The key really will be going forward once we learn what we did and figure out what we didn't do, what we could have done, how we might have treated things and people differently in order to make sure that it never happens again.
It's my honor and pleasure to welcome forward one of the stalwart advocates who's been speaking out about what's been happening in our LGBTQ community and the diversity of our community. Haran Vijanathan is also the Grand Marshal for this year's Pride Parade. So Haran, come on up.
Some of us here knew the men intimately, and some of us know the men through the stories we hear on the news and from others. Some had identified openly as gay, and some we did not know their sexual orientation. And we have to recognize that there's a lot of refugees in this country and undocumented workers who are fleeing persecution for who they are, who come to this city and into this country together. We will get the system to recognize the injustices throughout this entire thing, and we will make that change happen. Thank you again. And even within the LGBT community, when those posters went up and people were talking about the men that went missing, they were basically saying things like, well, they might have been deported, or they probably went back to their families to live their lives and stuff like that. And so this is an opportunity, again, unfortunately, under these occasions, that we can actually challenge homophobia within our communities as well.
There are so many layers or onion skins that we have to peel back of racism, homophobia. And when I say racism, I mean not just within society, but also within the LGBTQ communities, right? Because that exists too, and it's sometimes not given the attention that it deserves.
You know, could this be a situation where somebody is actually targeting or hunting gay men of color because they're not fully out? That's a reality that gay asylum seekers and LGBT people who are refugees in places like Canada, that's the reality that they live. And so that leads them to a very precarious situation where they become targets, or they could become targets because of this identity situation.
I don't think people have any idea how the rest of the world, not in all places, but in many places, still have laws that are incredibly hostile to LGBTQ people, and that they face terrible consequences, legal and social and other consequences, and that Canada, for many of them, is a beacon of hope.
When I've heard about Bruce McArthur case, it was shocking, but I have a different perspective from the rest of, Canadian LGBT community. I left Iran in 2005 and I came to Canada as a refugee in 2006. So, when we talk about vulnerable cases, a lot of people doesn't understand or doesn't get how, or which level are we talking about. It is about life and death. Something that all Middle Eastern LGBT share. We share a lot of bad memories of rape, assault, and that it's become normal for us. That it's not rape for us anymore, it's just rape. It's not rape. Bruce McArthur's story made me think more about, what we can do to help these LGBT refugees, because they're living in a deep fear back, in their countries, in their family. And then they escape their country of origin to Turkey as a bridge to come to a safe country like Canada. And I think it is our responsibility, or my responsibility, to make them prepare about, and make them ready to start their new life and a better life here. Today I'm going to meet a lot of Iranian and Afghan LGBT refugees. We cannot show their faces because they have, understandable fear of being outed to their family. A lot of them are not out to their family. They told their parents that they're going to school, they're going to get a visa. Some of them, they don't even know that they're in Turkey, so they told their parents that they're in Germany or other countries. And still some of their former refugees who came to Canada are not out with their family because they cannot tell them.
سلام چطوری خوبی؟ چطوری خوبی؟ خوش اومدی. Merci. So, let's speak English. Okay. How many days you will go to Canada in 3 days?
In 3 days,
So your English is good. So you told me that you have stress about your English.
Yeah, because during my living in Turkey, I never ever speak English to anybody.
But for someone who lives in Iran and then Turkey, speaking English like you, it's like level 4-5. Okay,
I
let's
hope
go.
so.
It's good. So you're going to Canada after how many days or month?
After 4 years and 1 month.
Did you already count it?
Yeah. About the second minute.
2,149,920 minutes living in Turkey.
Yeah.
4 years is much shorter.
Yeah. I have lots of stress, It's exactly like when I came from Iran to Turkey. I have lots of stress, and because I don't know what's happening in the future. Arsham, this is my diary book.
Scrap.
During my 4 years living in Turkey.
Your bus ticket. Oh, you have my picture as well.
Yeah.
So
Do you want to write something?
Life is full of moments. Live every moment. A lot of Canadians or American thinks, oh, they are in Turkey, they're safe, but it's not safe. Yeah. And even anything might happen in Canada as well. Have you heard about the gay serial killers?
Yeah, in Canada.
Yeah, in Toronto. So sometimes people, even they can come to Canada in order to have a peaceful and perfect life. Those guys who were killed by that, individual, they didn't know that they're coming to Canada and they're being killed.
Yeah.
It's much better than Turkey. It's much better than Iran. Life has its own challenges, but you have an opportunity to build your life.
For 30 years, I live in Iran, and I have to, every day I say lie to everybody, from my parents, my close friends, my colleagues, everyone,
Do you have to lie in order to survive?
And every morning you have to put a kind of mask, your face.
I always say that.
Yeah.
But taking off the mask is another challenge. I know that it is scary.
Very, very difficult.
Last year, one of our refugees, came to Vancouver after 13 months of waiting time in Dennisley. And 6 months later, he jumped from a bridge in Vancouver. And I don't know why. I always ask myself why. Imagine that you have to live in a country or in a city that you don't know their language, their culture, for 49 months. It makes you sick. It makes you psycho. And I told you that when I'm coming to Turkey, I can't sleep. Because I don't want, if something happened, I don't want to blame myself that if you didn't sleep, if you spent 1 hour to talk to that person, you could change their life. After he committed suicide, someone sent me a message that where have you been when he needed you? And I was like, I was here. Where were you? I cannot take it, I cannot take care of everyone. I need more people to take care of them.
Bruce McArthur currently stands charged before the courts for 8 counts of first-degree murder. Remains of 7 of the 8 victims were previously located at the rear of 53 Mallory Crescent behind me. Yesterday, the Toronto Police Service commenced excavation of the ravine. We are prioritizing areas which give us the strongest indications by K9 units. Yesterday afternoon, human remains were located at one of the first digging sites. These remains have been brought to Ontario Forensic Pathology Services for further examination. The excavation continues, and we anticipate being here for, well, at least until next week.
Hi, you have reached the office of the Chief Coroner of the Toronto West Region. Sorry that we have missed your call.
Oh, hello. This is Haran Vijayanathan, the Executive Director at the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention. We had registered the organization to reclaim the remains of the individuals from the Bruce McArthur case. For anyone who is not claimed, we would certainly claim them. But we also have some families. My hope and the agency's hope is that a systems change comes out of this, that we actually truly use this as an example of we are not immune to all of the world's problems. It can happen right here in this country as well and in this very city. And systems need to change to accommodate and account for that. And how do we hold people accountable? How do we hold systems accountable? How are you, Jim?
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. You're well?
What?
You're well?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Well, for 72, just getting up in the morning is good, right? How's everything going with that committee?
We wanted to make sure that all the missing persons aspects get
right, no, that's the important thing
and
of all
then,
this. The key question then is to one for Bruce, why did they stop the investigation in April of 14 and not do anything until August of...
That's what we're getting at. Like we wanted to make sure Houston was in there.
Yeah.
And see why.
I've been saying that for about a year, and I should have been saying it earlier.
Yeah.
This is an important event that happens each year in the life of our wonderful city. But this year it carries a special poignancy as we have all just stood here together to acknowledge and remember the missing and lost individuals within the Church Wellesley community. We have questions not only about why these lives were lost, but about the LGBTQ2S's community's relationship of trust with the city in general. But we can bring about change. In fact, people who came before me and before us that are here today fought hard for that change, and we, those of us here today and others who can't be, will continue to do that together.
I still believe that our systems that govern and protect us are still flawed, and it takes a system change for there ever to be justice. This was very apparent when the news of 8 men whose lives were taken by one of our own, right in our community. The murdered men, Skandinavaratnam, Abdul Basir Faizi, Majid Kayan, Sarush Mahmoodi, Dean Lisowick, Krishna Kumar Kanagaratnam, Salim Asen, and Andrew Kinsman.
It's really, really good.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic. I just congratulate.
Thank you.
Merci.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for everything that you've done with us supporting the
I'm looking
missing
forward
persons.
to seeing you at the head of the parade.
Yeah, on the Sunday. Yeah.
Good luck on Sunday.
Thank you so much, Norman.
We're going to be behind you.
Oh, amazing. Good. Like I went from nobody and nobody knew me except for the people that worked with me and the community and my family. And all of a sudden now I'm being recognized all over the place and being asked to speak at different things and going from, the back of the parade in the corner somewhere to watch the parade to now leading the parade. You never think a little brown boy from Winnipeg would do this. And a brown gay boy from Winnipeg would do this.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for coming. It's a little insane. We're trying to set up our float. As you can see, it's not the greatest looking thing in the world to be at the front of the parade, but it is what it is. And going from the back of the parade in the corner somewhere to now at the front of the parade, openly proud, and having my mom and my sister come along, I think that's really, really an achievement. So this is my mom, Raji, and this is my youngest sister, Shagani. You know, having both of them here, they were my strongest supports when I first came out. And my sisters, I think, already knew, and they were just waiting for me to confirm. I think my mom knew as well. And so when I came out, I wrote the letters and stuff and left it in the mailbox, and they've been very supportive, so it's really nice to have them here. On my 40th year of being in this world, and then being the Grand Marshal of the parade, and then having my family with me who are my greatest supports.
Our parents never talk anything like this about, and we don't go out. We don't know anything. It's until he put the letter in the mailbox, I don't know what does this mean.
What did the letter say?
That he is a gay. I was shocked inside, but I don't want to say anything. He is my only son. That's all I thought.
I think if it happened in Sri Lanka, or even with my dad around, he probably would be dead.
What do you mean?
Like my dad would have definitely done something to him. If not, people would have, I feel people would have found a way to get at him and get him, like kill him. Because for some reason they feel like it's a sin or it's wrong. I'm not sure why.
Happy Pride!
Alright.
This is our first Pride together,
nice.
and this is our first Pride ever.
Okay, so they're first. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you, guys.
Kamsag. When I look back in January, the intention of the letter writing was not for a spotlight to be on me or the agency. The intention was for me to put to the board to say that this agency, who serves South Asian and Middle Eastern communities, to take a stance on this issue, because if we don't do it, no one will.
My name is Salman Sima. I'm a political refugee from Iran. We are here to support LGBT rights in all over the world, including Islamic countries.
It's not a matter of attacking a religion. It's a matter of radicalism and how LGBT are treated in Islamic countries, and nobody in the liberal left, in the media, is talking about it. And these are our friends, these are our relatives that are being killed and persecuted in those countries. And nobody, if you talk about it here, they say you're Islamophobic. No, everybody in my family is a Muslim. I can't be Islamophobic, but I know radicalism. And nobody is taking a stance as if it's not anybody's business.
You're holding a picture of Salim?
Yes. Why? This is my brother. He was killed by Bruce McArthur. It was confirmed by the police.
How does that make you feel?
I feel very sad, and I joined today Pride celebration of the diversity and also memory of my brother. I'm marching with them. My brother's body hasn't been released yet. It is. I can't tell anymore at the moment because my situation is very difficult.
We're never ever going to stop people from doing things, but what we can do is put systems in place and ensure that there's a safe way for community to access those things, right? And people don't have to wait 8 years to find their loved ones. And we don't have to wait for a particular person in a particular community to go missing for them to be taken seriously.
I always said that, I was born in Iran. I didn't have any choice. And when I went to Canada, it was my second birthday. I was born again, but I had rights. I knew who I am. I knew what I can do. And indeed, it is a second birthday. Happy birthday, and you're gonna have birthdays in the future as well. And he said, I'm so happy that Peyman is living, and it's very tough that, I'm 35. I've been started from scratch many, many times. I hope that I go somewhere that I don't need to start from scratch one more time. And he said that we all had family. We didn't have choice to choose our family members, but he had the privilege to choose the new family members for him. Each of people that they are in this room, some of the pieces going to Canada, and he hopes that one day all these pieces join together and become one.
Good, how are you doing?
How are you?
Good.
We finally get to meet in person. Haran.
Haran.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you again for connecting us with the families.
How's that working?
It's actually working really good, so I'm in touch with a few of them.
Yeah.
And the others are kind of in and out, so we'll keep doing that until we get there.
Yeah, I had a good chat this week with one of the family members, so it was very enlightening.
Good.
So.
Good stuff.
As you know, on January the 18th of 2018, Bruce McArthur was arrested. He has been charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. Although the examination and identification of remains continues, we do not have any evidence to suggest that Mr. McArthur is responsible for anything more than the 8 murders to which he currently stands charged. At this time, we have no evidence to suggest that there are any further remains to be located at any further locations. The review of numerous cold cases and outstanding missing persons cases continues.
We'll see Hank. Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
How do you feel about today's announcement that seems to be kind of closing the circle?
It's a sad state of affairs. However, there's at least some closure, and as we go in through the whole review process and stuff, I think more answers will come out.
Why is it so important for you to be here and almost lend a voice to the victims who can no longer speak?
It's important for me to be here because we were outspoken right from the get-go in January, and it's important for us to follow through on that process and be present and continue so that it doesn't feel like we started something and we just dropped the ball.
Have to find ways to make sure that community members and police are always able to communicate, that there's open lines of communication, that there's mutual respect. That's something that always kind of comes out in the aftermath of a serial homicide case, that somewhere along the line, the lines of communication between a vulnerable community and the police have maybe not broken down totally, but that there are ways to improve those lines of communication.
I had a deep sense of sorrow for what these men probably went through in their final hours. To me, it's just the most disgusting manipulation you could possibly imagine, like finding somebody who's outish and then exploiting that, using the trust of a newcomer, which is pure and genuine in many cases. They just have come here hoping for a new life, hoping for finally to have a chance to be gay without persecution.
Like we just thought. It didn't happen here because we were accepting. And I guess, we obviously have learned some lessons from all this in terms of how we deal with missing people, and those lessons are in the process of being learned. I think in a city as dynamic as this, in a city as diverse as this, you can never stop and say, we've got this all licked. It's all done. We've read all of our own press clippings and we've concluded this is the greatest city in the world in which to live. It is the greatest city in the world in which to live. But if you stop and rest on your laurels in that regard, you are going to leave outstanding issues that do exist, especially as affects various marginalized groups of people.
We all look for reasons they might have disappeared, vanished, because they all vanish without a trace. You know, they left their cats, dogs, their car, their wives, in some cases. They vanish without a trace. And yet, the police, and even some of us in the gay community, who aren't marginalized particularly, maybe they arranged their own disappearance. That was kind of a rationalization for a while.
At the end of all of this, I think the community has had and is having a reckoning with itself, right? You know, how was it that these men were able to come here and disappear without us really noticing or raising the alarm or really freaking out, for lack of a better word? Because, you know, for all of our finger pointing at police, you know, both from the media perspective, the community perspective, you name it, there has to be some fingers pointing back, right? Because, you know, we can say you didn't put these pieces together, you didn't connect the dots, but at the same time, we didn't follow up. We didn't keep on some of these cases. It's not just a matter of us sitting back and saying, well, we hope the police figure everything out. You know, we recognize that's not always possible, and police are imperfect, systems are imperfect, investigators are imperfect. I think it does a disservice to say, here are the 2 things, 3 things, 4 things. It's 1,000 things.
We never decided to be who we are. It wasn't a choice for us. We didn't decide to be a member of LGBT community. This is who we are, and right now we are here. We didn't want to be here, but this is the reality. We had to leave our country. We are here. There's a lot of challenges, and my expectation is that people see us and understand us and give us a little bit, opportunity and room to be who we are. We have to be optimistic. There are a lot of times that we were emotional, about our sad part of our life, but it doesn't mean that I have to give up. That when they come to Canada, that hope doesn't break. That, Canada is like another Iran. It doesn't matter that you're being killed by Bruce or being executed by Iranian regime. We need somewhere to call home. Because, yes, we have a home that our parents live. But we need a place to call it home that we feel safe.